I made that TikTok coffee. It just felt cozy. Like, this is definitely a red wine album, but it's like 2:30. I mean, it is the weekend, but wine makes me so sleepy. Hey everyone, I'm Sangeeta, and today I'm sitting down to film because very recently Taylor Swift released her 8th studio album, which is called Folklore. And as is tradition here on this channel ever since 1989, I like to sit down, make a little video whenever Taylor releases a new album. I like to talk about, you know, every single track on the album, but I also like to talk about the experience of the album dropping and where I am personally. So it's a little self-indulgent time capsule. I really like making them, and I hope you like watching it. Like, honestly, it's so fun. Like, if you go back to my 1989 videos, I have like short, straight hair, and I have like a huge bow in my hair, and I'm so different than what I am now. And I love charting my growth, I guess. So for those of you who don't know how big of a Taylor Swift fan I have, here is my Reputation snake ring, here is my Lover phone case, here is a candle I bought that costs like a lot of money. It's a Lulabo candle, and I've always bought them because Alexa Chung likes them, but I bought the specific one right over here, Centol 26, because Taylor Swift apparently likes them. It's a great scent. I wouldn't have bought it if I hated it, but I really liked it. And in addition, this is a lip color Taylor Swift has also worn. It's called Back in Vogue from MAC. I don't just like love her music, I really love Taylor Swift. So I'm approaching this video assuming that you guys also like Taylor Swift at least a little bit, because I don't really, like, I can't get into every single bit of like mythology and lore behind her. But I'm gonna assume that you know at least a little bit, you know a little bit about her transformation over the past few years. So for at least the Reputation and Lover videos, I talked about the build up to the album, and the build up to an album is always something that Taylor Swift has done really well, I think. She always does a really good job of like leaving a trail of clues for her fans to figure out, and it's something that becomes very immersive for her fans. We love going through the music videos and trying to find the Easter eggs, references to other things, references to her own work, clues about future singles' names, etc. So it's always a very interesting, fun, and intense time. A lot of merch drops over the course of like 4 or 5 months, etc. But for Folklore, we actually had absolutely none of that, because I think we got, I can't do the math in my head, I think we got about like 17 hours warning before the album dropped. So it was very sudden. I remember, because it was the morning of July 23rd. I remember it was the morning because I was sitting in bed, like trying to convince myself that it was a good idea to get up and like find the will to live somewhere inside of me. And I remember Wes, my boyfriend, was in the other room, and he came in, and I was sitting bolt upright in bed, scrolling through my phone because I have Taylor Swift's like Instagram notifications on. And I was like, something's happening. She's doing something. And he's like, okay. Like, I definitely was really hyped. I was so excited. And just from the visuals, I knew that it was going to be an album that I personally would really like. All we had before the album dropped and we heard like a single note of music was the aesthetics of the cover, which was black and white, moody, foggy, woodsy. And as a child of the Pacific Northwest, that is kind of everything to me. I love foggy, woodsy vibes. So normally when Taylor Swift first announces an album, I hop on over to Reddit and we like casually talk about like whatever the first bit of material we're getting, whether it's like her Instagram being wiped and a snake video is posted, or some circles on a calendar, or 5 holes in a fence, or whatever it is. And we discuss the clues in a very calm but excited way. But on this day, it was just like sheer what is happening, because nobody had any idea. All we saw was the merch. That's all we really knew is in terms of like what we had to look forward to. Because normally, honestly, Taylor Swift albums leak. Like Red leaked weeks before the album was released, and Lover and Rep leaked like a day or two before. And this one didn't, of course, because it was so last minute, which I think was great, actually. Like, as fun as it is to experience that buildup and like decipher clues and all of that, it was kind of fun to go into the album with nothing, with like no preconceived notions, with nothing clouding my judgment, no predictions being made. All I had was the album. And in a lot of ways, I think that was kind of the point, because Taylor herself said, when you create something, like you create art, and you're really proud of this art piece, you should just put it out in the world. And that's what she did. And honestly, it's so funny to me because for 1989, for Reputation, for Lover, these are albums that she was like really excited about. She was like so careful, curating the release schedule, etc. And for Folklore, she was just like, here. And Folklore is probably the album that I've seen the most widespread acclaim and acceptance over it, because normally people are so critical of everything she does, but I've seen people in like every different subreddit talking about Folklore. Anytime Taylor Swift comes up, this time it's people being like, I'm normally a huge metalhead, but Folklore's really dope. Like, everybody loves this album, and I think it's so well deserved. This album is not just good, but I think it's like really well written. The lyrics are on point. The production is awesome. She worked with Aaron Dessner this time, and Aaron is one of the founding members and members of the band The National, and he also works with Justin Vernon from Bon Iver in a group called, or a duo called Big Red Machine. So I really like his work separately, and I think him with Taylor combined is such a good combination. Like, Taylor and Jack Antonoff is also a power duo, which is also present on this album, but I hope Taylor continues to work with Aaron Dessner, because I think they just work really well together. Another person Taylor worked with on this album that I do want to mention real quick is the singer-songwriter William Bowery, who, that's how Aaron Dessner referred to William Bowery, but William Bowery is a name of somebody who wrote the songs Betty in Exile and brought them to Taylor Swift, apparently, and no one knows who this person is. Like, no one has any idea. Like, it's pretty clear, honestly, that it's a pen name for somebody, unless it's not, and there's just someone called William Bowery who's like, I just prefer to stay out of the spotlight. But right now people are like, okay, William Bowery is the pen name of some singer-songwriter who has motivation to not get attention from this album, and everyone's like, who is it? A lot of people think it's Harry Styles, and I can kind of understand that, because Harry Styles and Taylor, like, I don't know that they're on any bad terms, but I can understand why they wouldn't want Harry's name on the album, because people would start speculating. And Joe as well, her current boyfriend, people think it could be him, and he also has motivation to not be on the album, you know what I mean, by name, because there would be a lot of drama, a lot of gossip, that kind of thing. And I can, from what I know about Taylor and Joe, which isn't a ton, and that's by design, I think, from their part, Taylor and Joe really like having separate careers, and they like keeping their work separate. And I don't think Joe would want anyone to think that he was using Taylor for any sort of clout or furthering his career. Like, they like to keep themselves very separate professionally, and I think that's really cool. So it could be Joe, it could be Harry, and I feel like eventually we'll find out, but like, I don't know who it is. Hey, what's up? Editing Sangeeta here. I just wanted to pop in and let you know that I'm almost like 100% convinced that William Bowery is Joe Alwyn, mostly because people who have received signed copies of Folklore, who have opened it, like some people have a little WB initial next to like Exile or Betty, one the William Bowery songs, and like, who else would just like have casual access while Taylor was signing them? Like, to me it just seems pretty clear, but no one knows. But I'm back to the actual album itself and the release process. Normally the day the album drops, I go to Target at 8 in the morning, right when it opens, which I absolutely hate doing, because I used to work retail, and anybody who came to the stores that open, I like actively hated them. But I go at 8 a.m., like very apologetically, I try to leave everyone alone, but I couldn't find the CD section in the Target I went to this time, so I had to ask somebody who was working there, and she was like, I got you, and she took me over to the CD display, and without even asking me, she just handed me both editions. She's like, there's actually 2 editions of this album, you should get both of them. And I was like, you're absolutely right, I'm going to get both of them. I was going to anyways, but I appreciated her enthusiasm. This is the standard edition on CD over here, and this is the Target exclusive edition. There's not like bonus tracks that are specific to this version or anything like that. I guess it's the Meet Me in the Mall edition, which means it has this specific cover, and it matches the vinyl edition. And I think the booklet is also like a collector's edition. It's not like nearly as exciting as past Target editions would be, but I think that's fine. I mean, we barely got any kind of warning that this album was coming, but her record label also did not have a warning. Like, I think they got a couple more days warning than we did. So the turnaround on merch is a lot longer than it normally is. Like, a lot of my vinyl that I ordered isn't supposed to ship until like December. So one thing, and we'll talk about this at the end of the track list discussion, there is one bonus track. It's available only on CD, so it's not available digitally. I guess that's what I deserve for filming this and waiting a week to edit, but it is now available digitally. But it is only available on CD, and it will be available on the vinyl edition. So if you are curious about that, you buy one of the vinyl versions, it should have the lakes on it. Before we get into the track list, I do want to mention briefly that this album differs from Taylor's past works because this is an album of songs that she wrote from her perspective and from the perspective of her friends, from her family, from, you know, imagined made-up characters. There is a huge variety of points of view on this album, and they're not all from her perspective, so I think that is important to note. So the first track on this album is a song called The One, which I think is kind of like the next phase of evolution of the song of I Forgot That You Existed. It's a very mature breakup song, and I think it's for that part of a relationship ending once you've healed, like once it doesn't sting quite as much. And I think it's a fun, like wistful, beautiful song, and it's a way of like the thesis of the song is like it would have been fun if you'd have been the one. And I think there's a maturity of looking back and knowing that a relationship, just because it's over, doesn't have to be something you look back on in anger or in bitterness or anything like that. Like, you can look back fondly on a former relationship even if it's over. It's a very peaceful sound to me, like it sounds like early summer. Next up we have Cardigan, which is the first single that was released at midnight. I guess the single's official date was the 27th, which was a couple days after the album released, but Cardigan had a music video that came out at the same time the album did, so on the 24th. The night of the 23rd, if that makes sense, at midnight, but it was technically the 24th. So like I said, I'm gonna talk about this assuming you've listened to the entire album at least a few times, because Cardigan is an interesting song because it is part of the teenage love triangle that she said she wrote about on this album. I think the three songs that are part of the teenage love triangle are Cardigan, August, and Betty. A lot of people say some of the other songs could tie in, and they could, but I think Cardigan, August, and Betty are the three songs. I think Cardigan is from Betty's point of view, and I think just the way the lyrics are, it sounds a lot like somebody who's not a teenager anymore looking back at the relationship. One lyric that like stood out to me a lot is chasing shadows in the grocery line. Like that lyric stood out to me because I think anyone who's experienced that knows what a vivid line that is. It's like when you're just going about your mundane day-to-day life and you're just like think you see somebody or you suddenly remember a moment. And I think that's so poignant. I love that. Another lyric that like hugely stood out to me is the lyric Peter losing Wendy, because it signifies that the man she's talking about, who's James, is kind of immature and just isn't willing to grow up the way Betty is willing to grow up. So I think that was a really cool lyric. And that's also further backed up in the lyric, I knew you'd miss me when the thrill expired. Great lyrics. And one thing somebody pointed out that I didn't realize the first time I heard the song, but in the chorus when she sings, you put me on and said I was your favorite, put me on is a way of saying you're leading somebody on. And I didn't realize that the first time I heard the song. I thought it was about like literally embracing somebody. That's the way I heard it. But saying you put me on and said I was your favorite, when you think about it that way, the meaning of the song really shifts, because I didn't think the song was like a happy love song when I heard it. I definitely thought there were some sadder elements, and it had a wistful retrospective tone. And that last lyric, and if you interpret the lyric put me on as leading on, I think it reframes that in a way that makes a little bit more sense, at least for me. Next up, we have a song I was so excited to hear. It's The Last Great American Dynasty. I had no idea. Like when we saw the track list, I was like, holy crap, what's this gonna be about? And it turns out that the song was about Rebecca Harkness, who was an American socialite and dancer and fairly accomplished in her own right, but she did marry somebody called William Harkness, and they bought a house called Holiday House that is now owned by Taylor Swift. And I think this song is really interesting because the album is called Folklore, and I think this song really speaks to the mythology of where we live and the mythology of the American experience, like the classic Americana experience, which I think Taylor kind of touched on in songs like Starlight in the past, and talking about these classic sort of American I don't know, figures and stories. And I just love this song for its place on this album, talking about the mythology of where we live and the idea, in a way, I think, of living up to the people who came before us and being inspired by them and paying tribute to them in various ways. Because there's almost no way that Taylor Swift heard about Rebecca Harkness and didn't feel some kind of connection to her because of the way they were both vilified for who they were. And she talks about it in the lyrics, saying things like, how did a middle-class divorcee do it? Like, how did this woman get this man? Like, completely discounting her own accomplishments or her own personality or anything about her. And I think Taylor Swift probably heard those things and just related. And I think there's a lot of women in the world that can relate to this, like Meghan Markle, for example. Next up, we have the absolute masterpiece that is Exile. Okay, so I like Bon Iver, I like Justin Vernon, I love his voice a lot, and when it started, like when his voice came in at the beginning of the song, I was very startled because I didn't expect him to start off this song, but honestly the way their voices blend together on this track is just like beyond, and especially the way their voices don't blend together, the way their voices are layered, because somebody pointed out, and I totally heard this too, but it's like two people arguing, they're not listening to each other, they're speaking over each other to get their point across, and it's so like not only masterfully written, but the way it's produced, the way this entire song is structured is so good. And this is honestly one of the most beautiful songs, and it's just like, it makes me who's in like a happy, fulfilling relationship that I don't doubt for a second, feel those feelings. Like, it's stunning, and I love the key change in it, and I guess Justin Vernon wrote that key change, so he's credited as a writer. This is yet again another song Aaron Dessner produced, and this is one of William Bowery's songs, so who the frick is that? I want to know, because this song is an absolute masterpiece. Next up, we have a song called My Tears Ricochet, which a lot of people have theorized is about Big Machine Records, and I find that to be an interesting perspective. One of my absolute favorite lyrics on the song is, "If I'm dead to you, then why are you at the wake?" And I think that's such a common feeling, not just in romantic relationships, but friendships and other relationships too. Where it's like, truly, if I'm the worst person ever, and truly if I'm dead to you, then why can't you keep my name out of your mouth? And I think that's true for a lot of relationships. One thing I haven't really seen many people discuss is the name of the song, which is My Tears Ricochet. And of course, Taylor's, like, one of her first big hits was Teardrops in My Guitar. And the word ricochet specifically refers to, well, when you look at the definition, it specifically refers to bullets and ammunition bouncing off of something. And it's interesting when you think about it that way. It's not a fully formed thought, but I thought it was an interesting name. Okay, so next up we have Mirror Ball, which is one of my favorite songs. And do you see that painting I did over there of Taylor? It's the colors in the background, the pink and gold, that's what I see when I hear Mirror Ball. Because like, for a lot of songs, I can like see swirls of color, and for Mirror Ball, it's like pink and glittery and like white and all of that, like the background of that painting. And Mirror Ball to me sounds like rollerblading in the 70s or something. I don't know what it is, but it sounds like, I don't know. It's such a beautiful song, and it's so self-aware, and it sounds so shimmery and magical when you first listen to it. You don't realize that it is actually a really sad song. Like the phrase, shattered edges glisten. I think talking about herself as a mirror ball is really interesting. I'll show you every version of yourself tonight. She sings, all I do is try, try, try. And I think this is probably one of the personal songs on the album. I don't want to speculate too much, but some songs are very clearly about other people. This song is very much, I think, about her. Next up, we have Seven, which is the 7th track on the album. Look at that. I love this song. It's really sad, obviously. It's a song about being young and having a really good friendship, and I don't know. It's at its core, the song is about being really young and having a friend, a relationship with someone who's also your age, who's going through abuse at home. It's a really heavy topic, and there's a way that she sings about it that's very like childlike and naive, but wistful. And it's really sad. The bridge where she's singing, I've been meaning to tell you, I think your house is haunted and your dad's always mad and that must be why. Like, that gave me chills the first time I heard it. And just like, I don't know, phrases like hiding in the closet and stuff. And I think a lot of people have interpreted this album as having a lot of themes about you know, being gay. And I think that whatever Taylor has intended and the way Taylor has written the song, I think art and music and everything belongs to the audience. And I think those interpretations are just as important. And I think, I don't know, I don't really have a lot to say about that specifically, but I do think it's really valid when people interpret these songs that way, for sure. Like, they're just as valid as any other interpretation. This song actually reminded me of the book A Little Princess, which I really loved when I was little. Just phrases like, we'll move to India. While we're on the subject of Seven, I actually want to talk about the fact that a lot of people find this entire album to be Lana Del Rey inspired, whereas I don't really. I think some of the songs, like this song in particular, like the lyrics Sweet Tea in the Summer, has a Lana sound. Like, the lyrics are kind of Lana and the cadence that she sings it in is kind of Lana. I don't think this entire album is like a Lana Del Rey ripoff like people want to pretend. I think it's some inspiration from Lana. There's a lot of, like, you know, a little bit of Joni Mitchell, a lot of Mazzy Star influence is what I hear, especially on the next track, which is August. I also hear a lot of the National influence, which makes sense because it's produced by Aaron Dessner, and I think also co-written for a lot of the tracks. So I just wanted to say that because that was controversial, because I mean, if you know about me, you probably know about the Needle Drop, who's a YouTube reviewer. And I think his review was actually quite favorable, and I don't know why people were so upset about it. But the one thing I disagreed with him was that he said, like, basically, he said this level of biting of one's contemporary is like unforgivable, is how he talked about Taylor's Lana inspiration. I was like, really? Like, I don't hear it that much. He talked about that for Cardigan, and I just don't hear it. I hear a lot of other influences just as much, if not more. Next up, track 8, month 8, we have August, which is my birthday month and one of my favorite songs on this album. This is the second of the Teenage Love Triangle songs, at least the way I'm interpreting it. And if you don't think so, that's fine. You can tell me why in the comments. The reason I think so is because lyrics in this song mirror lyrics in Betty and in Cardigan, and I think it's interesting, and especially the lyric Meet Me Behind the Mall, that's very like teenage summer to me. Like, I haven't hung out in a mall since I was a teenager, and that was what teenagers did in the town that I grew up in, because there wasn't like a ton to do for teenagers, I guess, that we were allowed to do. So Meet Me Behind the Mall is such a teenage lyric, and it's so sad too. Like, malls are such a bright, like, superficial, fun energy, and Meet Me Behind that, it's like hiding, obviously. But I just thought that was a sad lyric. Somebody noticed that I thought was just so clever. Like, I don't know how people notice this stuff. At timestamp 2 minutes and 47 seconds, Taylor sings Get in the Car, and then on Betty at the same timestamp, 2:47, she's like, the lyric Taylor sings is, she said, James, get in. How do people notice this? I just thought it was smart, and just like another thing that ties the song August to Betty. And Betty obviously ties to Cardigan, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I think the way the song sounds, August, is so Mazzy Star. Like, that's the vibe I get from this. It sounds like the beginning does sound to me like being on the coast and salt air. It's summery, it's beautiful. I don't know. The sound of the song is so golden and shimmery, like summer, and it sounds like summer when you're in high school and summer still means something. Another lyric I just think is so good was, back when we were still changing for the better, wanting was enough. For me, it was enough. And there's something so sad about this song, as beautiful as it is. It's the girl, which I'm calling her August. I don't know what her name is, but I'm calling the third person in the love triangle August. She knows that James is not hers, and she knows that she doesn't have him, but she wants him, and I don't know. He was never hers. to lose, and she sings that, and it's so beautiful and sad, and I love the song August, definitely in my top 5 songs. Next up we have This Is Me Trying, which I didn't even have to hear the song to know I would relate to it. I think all of us in quarantine and in life can relate to this sentiment of just like knowing that you're trying your best, and even if you see it's not enough for a certain moment, just knowing you're giving everything your all. And there's a verse after the first chorus that resonated with me where she says, they told me all my cages were mental, so I got wasted like all my potential. So good and relatable. And the one part where she sings, I was so ahead of the curve became a sphere. It made me think about being in like 2nd and 3rd grade, everyone being like, you're a genius, so you're so ahead of everything. You're in all your advanced reading groups, you're in all the advanced math groups, you're so smart, you're gonna be amazing. And just not being able to live up to that as I grew up and progressed through school, and just feeling like there was something wrong with me because I was no longer in the advanced things, when really I just didn't know what I liked, and I didn't know how to learn stuff because everything came naturally to me when I was younger. But that lyric, I was so ahead of the curve became a sphere, like really resonated. Ooh, next up we have Illicit Affairs. I didn't really know what to expect going into this song, but I thought it was so great. I don't know if bitter's the right word, but there's something so like, are you really? Like, don't mess with me anymore. Like, it's that kind of energy. And lyrics like, I got like, tell your friends you're out for a run, you'll be flushed when you return. I was like, oh my gosh. Because one thing I like about Taylor Swift, and one reason she has such a universal appeal, is a lot of her lyrics, even the really suggestive ones, have that vagueness where if I was 8 and I heard that, I'd be like, I don't get it. But I sort of get the overall perspective, but I don't get what that means exactly. I love the sound of this song for her. I think the way her voice sounds, not just on this song, but the entire album, is just stunning. I love it. I think it's such a good sound for her. The imagery on this song is incredible as well. Like, who writes the lyric, dwindling mercurial high? I can't even say it. And she wrote it and sang it. Brilliant. And obviously, I think it's the bridge part where she sings aggressively, like, don't call me kid, don't call me baby, look at this godforsaken mess that you've made me. You tell him, Taylor. So next up we have Invisible String, which I actually think like that might actually be one of my favorite love songs she's ever written. I think it's just like, I don't know, in the song Daylight, she sings, I once believed love was burning red, but it's golden, like daylight. And I think this kind of ties into that because she's talking about one single thread of gold tied me to you. And there's something so just, I don't know, it really resonated with me. Just the concept of fate bringing you to the person you're meant to be with. And she's talking about things like, bad was the blood of the song in your cab on your first trip to LA. You ate at my favorite spot for dinner. And it's talking about, I assume, Joe. I don't know who else it would be about, but she's singing about Joe, all of these things that when you're looking back, it's like, yeah, obviously we were destined to be together. And I love the part where she talks about going back to the park and hell was the journey, but it brought me heaven. And it just made me, like, I recently, last year, went back to Portland with my boyfriend, Wes, and I don't know, I related to this song, showing him around the park that I used to sit in and daydream about my life, and I related. The chorus of this song is just absolutely beautiful. The way she sings time, curious time, time, mystical time, beautiful. I don't know why they didn't call the hourglass they were randomly selling time, mystical time, or something like that, but I don't know. Next up we have Mad Woman, which is a song I think a lot of people can relate to with the sentiment here. Every time you call me crazy, I get a little more crazy. How about that? Because I think every woman has been called crazy or overly emotional. I think Taylor has a quote where she's like talking about how men react, but women only overreact. And I think that's very relatable. There's times in my life where I've been really passionate. I've, you know, laid down my boundaries and laid down my feelings, and I've been told that I'm over dramatic and being sensitive and I just need to, you know, be quiet and that sort of thing. And I mean, it's sad that everybody and somebody as like powerful, I guess, as Taylor Swift also is spoken to that way. There's like no escape for any of us, but it is nice to have a song to listen to when I get called crazy, I guess. Another lyric I really liked was, you poke that bear till her claws cut out and you find something to wrap your noose around. It's like when you're provoked and you react because you have a genuine right to react when somebody is poking you. You do. You have a right to react. And then they're like, see, she's overly emotional just because you got upset because somebody was bullying you for like weeks leading up to that. I don't know. I think everyone can relate to that feeling. There's a lyric at the beginning that I didn't fully understand, but someone online pointed out that the concept of putting her face on the neighbor's lawn, I guess on Music Row in Nashville, when an artist has a #1, the label will put out banners of the artist's face. So you can just imagine somebody who might not like Taylor Swift right now would be driving to their offices or driving home and see Taylor's face. And I like the lyric, does she smile or does she mouth fuck you forever? Because I and many others heard that differently. They didn't hear the pause after mouth. I heard that. I was like, what did she say? I had to rewind. Next up, we have a track called Epiphany, which is about her grandfather who was in the army, I think, fighting at Guadalcanal. And I think the song is interesting because half of it is about the army experience and the second half is about COVID. She doesn't straight up say COVID, but it's about a nurse or a doctor treating a patient and, you know, holding hands through plastic. And I love this song and I think it's so sad. And if we're talking about folklore as a concept, when we're talking about the song Epiphany, I think it's an undeniable thing and a really tragic thing that there's so many eras of mass suffering because of war and disease, not just in America, obviously, but throughout the entire world. And unfortunately, it's such a shared part of the human experience. And I think that's what the song in some ways is about, and unfortunately everyone can really relate to this right now. Next up, we take a very sharp turn to a very different kind of sound. We have Betty, which is a song that's very reminiscent of the kinds of sounds that she would explore on albums like her debut and Fearless. It's a song that wouldn't be out of place on Fearless. That's my opinion of Betty. Betty is the third song in the teenage love triangle story. It's from James's perspective, talking about Betty, and I love this song. This is one of my favorite tracks. It's a very cute song. I don't think Inez is the third woman, because if she was, then Betty wouldn't be hearing rumors from her. It wouldn't be rumors if Inez was directly involved. Do you know what I mean? That's how I look at it anyways. I think Inez is just some like class gossip. I love her. This song is so high school to me. Like it makes me think of being in high school, which is what it is. Like it's a song about like at the high school dance and, you know, teenage love and all of this stuff. And it's so beautiful. Like I love this song. The way she constructs it is amazing, because at the end when James goes up to Betty's house and is like ready to try to win her back and like, I'm gonna come to like apologize and tell you I love you and all of this stuff, it's just amazing because the way the music swells and like the key change, it's so like reminiscent of some kind of like adrenaline boost. That's what it makes me think of. That part makes me feel like I just came home in high school after hanging out with like the boy I had a crush on, and I'm just like, you know, get in bed and I'm just like sitting there dreaming about, you know, how amazing and romantic I think our life together is going to be. There's something so beautiful about it and so genuinely pure, which is what, you know, a lot of high school relationships can be. It's very much a Fearless track, and I love that. Next up is a track called Peace, which I do really like. The first lyric of it is, our coming of age is come and gone, which I thought was interesting after the teenage love triangle closed off. It's kind of another chapter of the story Archer started, where back on Lover, in this track Archer, she sings, who could ever leave me but who could stay? And Peace is kind of like that too, where she sings, would it be enough if I could never give you peace? It's also kind of a continuation of tracks like Daylight, and it's nice to have a friend, honestly, in a way. She sings, the devil's in the details, but you got a friend in me. It's kind of about how in Daylight, when she sings about how love is not quite as fiery and passionate as you would think it would be, but love is very comfortable and very safe, and that's what it should feel like. Okay, my camera died, but we are back to talk about Hoax, which is the final track on the standard track list of this album, it's a song that's really sad, and a lot of people still interpreted this whole album as being from Taylor's perspective, where like thinking it was a personal breakup song, and it is a very sad end of love song, and maybe it is from her perspective. I don't know. I'm not here to speculate. I think it's interesting to note that Hoax and the song The One were actually written last, and Aaron Dessner said they were kind of designed to bookend the album, and I think that's interesting to note. I mean, it's very obviously like a sad song about a relationship. I think that much is clear. There are lyrics like, "This is frozen my ground," which I think is interesting, and the part where she sings, "Stood on the cliffside, screaming, give me a reason. Your faithless love's the only hoax I believe in. Don't want no other shade of blue but you. No other sadness in the world would do." So good. I just think, I don't know. I don't really want to speculate about her personal relationships, but I think a lot of the lyrics on this song are really interesting, especially when you contrast them to lyrics on the bonus track, which is called The Lakes, which I guess we'll talk about right now. The Lakes is a song that is placed very specifically, and it's not as easy to get to. And in some ways, I think The Lakes is like designed for people who already like her. Like, it's for fans to listen to. And I think it's kind of like a goodbye in a way. Like at the end of the Reputation tour and Reputation itself, I was like, I just have a feeling that the eras of Taylor Swift being always in the media, always being photographed, like leaving the gym or whatever it is in New York City, I feel like that era is over. Like, I felt even then that she was stepping back from the spotlight. And I mean, she has ever since then. I mean, not to be like I was right, but I was. And my theory about her just wanting to take a step back and like live out what she was talking about on the song The Lucky One back on Red, I think that era is happening now. And I think she's sung about this since Red. Like, I don't know, retreating, chose the Rose Garden over Madison Square. The Lakes is a song that I firmly believe she wrote as a poem before it became anything musical. Just the lyrics of it, because I think the sound is really good, but I do think that some of it is a little bit more disjointed in the sense that it's a very beautiful musical backing, but if she had just spoken over it, it would have been just as effective. But I like the way it is a song. I think it's beautiful. I love the beginning part. It's like a beautiful, like 40s, beautiful music. Like, it sounds so old and vintagey. I just think it's a gorgeous lead into the song. And I think the song is pretty clearly about the Lakes District in England, which I don't know that much about personally, but I guess Taylor and Joe have spent a lot of time there. And I think the song is so beautiful. It's about like running away to the woods, to the lakes, literally, I guess. There are lyrics, like if we compare the track to Hoax, where she sings, "This is frozen my ground," and the betrayal and hurt that she felt on the song Hoax. You contrast that to the lyric on The Lakes, where she sings, "A red rose grew up out of ice frozen ground with no one around to tweet it." Like, part of me just wants to read the lyrics to The Lakes and say nothing else, because I think they really speak for themselves. I think that what Taylor wants to do, and what I would not blame her for and almost like be happy for her if she did this, is like retreat. She has enough money to retreat and only make music that she genuinely wants to make. Like, she doesn't have to worry ever again about like, oh, is this going to be profitable? Is this going to do whatever? It probably will be, but also she has enough money to just do art for art's sake and not worry about anything. And like, that is the most incredible freedom that I could ever imagine. And I'm happy for her. And I hope that she'll continue, like with this album, to make music that is a little bit self-indulgent. And it's more about like the art that she wants to release, rather than being like, I need to make a really commercially viable album like she did with 1989, which was good. And I think she probably had fun making it. She's made it clear, especially in the documentary Miss Americana, that that wasn't necessarily the healthiest time for her mentally. And she just seems a lot more happy and releasing all of this music that that she really wants to release, and experimenting a little bit with sound. And I think that it's good for her and it's good for us fans because, I mean, it's good music. I mean, I obviously love it. A lot of people have said like it's about not leaving behind the fans, and like maybe it is, but I interpreted it very fully as her being like, no, listen, I love Joe and I want to be with him and I want a very like pure life away from the superficiality and like artificiality of the spotlight and Hollywood and all of this stuff. And I want that for her. I mean, as a fan of hers, I want her to be happy. And it sounds like she is making a very conscious decision to step back. And I like prepared to put on clown makeup because I've said this after every single album since Reputation. I've said she's taking a step back. She's not going to release music for a while, but like maybe that's not what's happening. She's taking a step back so she can just release music and she doesn't have to worry about the rest, and she can focus on herself, which like truly she deserves. I think everyone deserves that. Like I said, in Miss Americana, she's talked a lot about like how mentally taxing certain elements of trying to be on all the time are and trying to please everybody. And like now she's coming for, you know, really dangerous things in politics that are trying to happen. Like she's speaking out against them, and she's not as concerned with burning bridges, because some bridges you should burn because you don't want some people to get into your life. Like burn some bridges. I think everyone has lakes. Everyone has a place to escape to. Like for me, it's like the Pacific Northwest. It is interesting the way she talks about not just fame, but the concept of being on and performing. It makes me think of like Bo Burnham, who I obviously adore. Talked about him before, and I recommend Make Happy if you haven't watched it or listened to it. It's his stand-up special. It's brilliant. And if you've watched Make Happy, you should also listen to his appearances on the Pete Holmes podcast, because they're long. Like Pete Holmes talks a lot, but it's great if you want to hear Bo Burnham talk a lot about the concepts of performing and how we're raised in a generation these days, like people my age, millennials, and probably younger to a more intense degree even. We were kind of raised to be like, you're performing all the time. Here's like social media. Here's all this stuff. Perform all the time, just arbitrarily for everybody. And I don't know. It's interesting to think about and compare or contrast the things Taylor Swift is doing. I think there is actually some thematic overlap. All right, everyone, I've been talking for like an hour and a half, and I hope to cut this down to a point where it makes sense, because for these videos, I turn on my camera, I drink this, and I'm like, all right, go. And I just talk about the album for a long time. I probably repeat myself for a lot of it. That's probably what I'll cut out. I'm not like gonna cut out anything that's good. All right, guys, so I'll talk to you down in the comments. Let me know what your top 3 favorite tracks from Folklore are. I know it's really hard to narrow it down. Mine are This Is Me Trying, Betty, and The Lakes. It's so funny because someone's like, there's no such thing as somebody's actual favorite song from Folklore. It's actually what song you need. I thought that was interesting and probably really true. And if This Is Me Trying, Betty, and The Lakes is telling me anything about where I am in my life, it's that I need to get back over to the West Coast soon. So don't forget to subscribe. I'll talk to you down in the comments, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.